Good evening, everybody.
Hey.
Hope everybody's doing good tonight. Want to get you guys to like the video, share the video, subscribe to our page, and follow us on TikTok and Instagram at Me and My House '07. I just found out that the '07 stood for the year we got married. I had no idea why that was on the end of Me and My House, but now I know, and you guys know as well. So
Right.
I'm going to begin tonight by putting out a disclaimer. Men that are watching, go ahead and get prepared. You're about to hear about something that I would venture to say, have heard more than one time from your wife, and that would be that your communication skills are lacking. You need to communicate better. You need to communicate more. I've heard it. You've heard it. So here she goes.
All right. Hey, Dana. I just saw
Hey,
she had on.
Terry,
Hey, Terry.
April, Kristen,
Bailey. Yes. Kyle, I know you're watching.
Kyle watching from a distance.
All right. So Slade and I had a few conversations about this. I'm going to turn so I can see you because I feel weird the way I'm sitting.
Okay.
Okay. Sorry, guys. So we had a few conversations
I
and
see you, Terry.
funny. We were talking about there's different types of communication. Well, there's in our everyday life, I would say we're either passive, passive aggressive, aggressive, or assertive. And I'm going to talk about those for a second, but then I'm going to go on to talk about some different types of communication in marriage. I think these are great terms for regular communication, but I think there's some better terms for communication in a marriage. So I'm just going to start out by saying, to be passive might just be you avoiding expressing your opinion. Passive aggressive would be a pattern of indirectly expressing negative feelings instead of addressing them directly. So if you're passive, a lot of times you don't say anything. If you're passive aggressive, you say something, but not directly. Like you could say something like, well, the light bulb's not going to change itself. Well, why don't you just say, can you please change the light bulb instead of being passive aggressive? And assertive is behaving confidently and expressing oneself clearly and directly. We want to be assertive, but we don't want to be aggressive because that's aggression is, you're attacking someone. And so that's not what we're wanting to do. I would say the first several years of our marriage, we were passive aggressive a lot. I would say more than several years. That was the way we communicated, not effectively.
Yeah, that was our. I don't know. That's just the way we talked to each other. That's the way we communicated. We were extremely passive aggressive in everything. Like I told her when we were talking about it, I was like, I was passive and passive and passive until I was passive aggressive. And she was probably more assertive until she was passive aggressive.
Yes.
And passive aggressive behavior comments never get the desired result. They never
Agreed.
get what you're intending to get. They always fail to meet the goal. whatever I would say when I was trying to be passive aggressive just led to an argument. Whatever she would say trying to be passive aggressive would lead to an argument. It always gets the exact opposite of what you're looking for.
Yes. So Bailey will put some different definitions in the chat because I'm just going to hit a few key terms. And whenever the chat's over, whenever the live is over, she's going to go back and put it in the comments so that you guys can have it if you would like it. But the first style of communication in a marriage is a dominator. And we all know someone like this. They assert their own needs and opinions. They don't like to be wrong. They don't like to lose. Their strategy is to convince and control others into thinking, doing, believing what they want. We all know someone like that. It is their way or it is no way. You cannot talk to them. They tend to say things like, you should do this, or you always do this, or you never do this. Why don't you, whatever. They tend to say things like that. And they say those things because they want you to feel bad. Terry. They want you to do exactly what they want you to do. And so they think by dominating the situation, that's the way it will get done. I would say the only relationship you should have a dominating relationship would be parent-child. Obviously, you know what's best for them at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years old. They don't know what's best for them. You're going to dominate that situation, not harshly, but you're going to do things because they need you. Oh, Kyle said I'm late. I'm here.
Hey, Kyle.
They're going to, kids need you to do that. A grown person don't need you to dominate a situation for the most part.
No, that the term dominators makes me think a dominator speaks to someone in a way that makes them feel less than, makes them feel small, makes them feel useless, and makes the dominator feel validated and needed.
Yes, I agree. And the second term I have is accommodator. And they tend to put the needs, opinions, feelings of someone else above their own. They're polite, easy to get along with. During conflict, they give in. They just say, okay, yes, whatever. They don't want to offend someone else. They may be passive aggressive. They say things like, what do you want? Or, it doesn't matter to me. What do you need? Let's just get along. Is that okay with you? And to be really honest, that's what Slade and I were the first 10 years of our marriage.
Yeah.
We were accommodators. We didn't love conflict, and we still don't like conflict. But what we didn't realize is by avoiding or accommodate, we weren't avoiding it necessarily.
We just weren't addressing it.
We just weren't really addressing it. We were accommodating how the other person felt instead of thinking about, well, this is important to me and they should hear this though. And that's what we did. The next one is avoider. Minimize differences. Avoiders' behavior include denying the seriousness of a situation, suppressing their feelings, using humor, minimizing, being apathetic, distracting, acting like everything is okay. They are easygoing, independent, rational, and detached.
I'm a borderline avoider.
in some situations.
Yeah.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
They say things like, oh, it's no big deal. Let's not make a mountain out of a molehill. I said I was sorry. Let's be logical. Well, sometimes I always wanted to hear them. If they come to me and was like, you hurt my feelings. This, I felt like you were attacking me or whatever. I wanted to hear them because that wasn't my intention ever. And so therefore, I want to make sure they felt heard. And it's the same thing with Slade. You know, just because I might not understand why he feels that way, it's not for me to understand. Those are his feelings, and he's entitled to those. And it's not my place to look at him and say, well, I don't understand why you feel that way. You shouldn't feel that way. That's unfair. No, it's okay that he feels that way. And the fact that I made him feel that way, I should feel sorry about that.
Agreed.
And the last one is collaborators. And this is what you would strive to be. This is where we are at this point.
And this is the goal.
They assert their own needs, point of view, and are empathetic for the views of others. They can be vulnerable enough to assert their own views, perspective, needs, feelings in a non-dominant or controlling way. Likewise, they can be sensitive to the perspective, needs, feelings of others. So they can be empathetic with the other person. They can hear those feelings and say, oh my goodness, I'm so sorry that you feel that way, and actually mean it.
Yeah.
But then they can also say, I feel like this. I think you did this or whatever. Yeah, I told Bailey to post it in there so you guys could have it. Kyle. And I don't know, I guess it won't let her post but so many words
It
at
only
the
let
time.
her put so many words
That's so stupid.
per comment.
That's dumb. Anyway, and collaborators say things like, this is how I see things or feel. How do you feel about this? What's important to you? Is this what I hear you saying? Can I be open, honest, tell you about what I need or how I was hurt? And then how can I support you? I think all of those things I just said are really good, because I think it's important sometimes to say, like, if I hear him saying something, I'll say it back to him. I say, well, I hear that you're saying this. And sometimes it's not what he's saying. And so then he'll say, no, I'm saying, and he'll repeat and he'll change his wording. And then I'll say, oh, so you're saying, and if I get it right that time, he'll say, yes, that's what I'm saying. If not, then we'll sit here and talk about it until I get what he's saying. And he doesn't get mad with me or frustrated. Like, I'm sure he is frustrated after he's had to try to explain himself for the 4th time. But sometimes, like, we're different people. So the way he says something and the way I say it is not going to be the same all the time.
And we're just different. Men and women are just different. I could say something and she take it one way, and she said, well, you made me feel this way. Well, like, to me, it's like, I don't even know how that's possible that made you feel that way. But if I made you feel that way, I apologize for making you feel that way. And this is what I was trying to say. It's the same thing. She can say something to me and I can take it some way, and she's like, what? How did you get that out of what I said? But it's just the differences in, I think, men and women, and
I agree.
The way that you overcome that, the way that we overcome that is we talk it out. We communicate. We figure out what the other person was trying to say before we blow a fuse and get mad, because that leads nowhere. That just leads to aggression.
Yeah.
The aggressive talk.
And you can't be offended. I mean, Jordan Morris talked about it this morning.
Yeah.
But you cannot be offended by what they're saying. I mean, you can, but you're not. I mean, he can be offended by what I said, but to be really honest, I hate that he was offended by that. But if I was telling him the way he made me feel, well, then that's just too bad that he was offended by that.
Yeah, what Jordan said this morning was when him and he and Kelsey were in premarital counseling, the person told them, you have to be unoffendable. You have to be unoffendable. And that is, when he said that, I was like, well, that is great advice, because
Absolutely.
it's so easy to get offended. It's so easy for what they say for what she says to hurt my little feelings, and then me walk around with my little feelings hurt for days and days and days.
Yes.
But if I'm unoffendable, and golly, I wish I could remember. He said, what you start off as is being offended, and then it turns into resentment, and then it turns into unforgiveness. So the longer I walk around offended at her by what she said to me, then it's going to turn into resentment towards her for what she said, and then I'm going to be harboring unforgiveness, which is sin. And so that offended mindset ultimately leads me into sin, because I'm now holding unforgiveness against her when we hadn't even talked about what she said or why I was offended.
Yes. And, so I made a little chart. Hold on. Chart. Okay.
Should have had your little chart.
Should I have my little chart? Okay, so.
She worked hard on this.
Boy, Gavin drew it for me. Okay. So you can see it says dominate, collaborate, accommodate, avoid. The reason why I made this chart is because down here you see empathy, and then to the side you see assertiveness. And so if you look at it, you can see that dominators or dominate, they're high assertiveness, low empathy.
They can't see your mouth, man.
They don't have to see my mouth.
Well,
they can hear me.
It's better if they can see you talking.
Well, I mean, I'm so short, I can't hold it.
That's why I hold it.
Thank you.
They can still
Appreciate
see me.
you. Accommodate or accommodators, you can see it's high in empathy, low in assertiveness. An avoider, they're low in both. And then collaborate, they're high in both. And that's what you want. You want to be high in assertiveness and empathy. Like, you want both of those things. So anyway, this is the little chart they had I found online, and I was like, oh, that's a good chart to show what I'm trying to say. Anyway, hopefully that helped. That's the teacher in me. Anyways, let me say this, we're always communicating, whether it be verbal or nonverbal. I say all the time, you know what I'm thinking before I open my mouth most of the time. Because my face probably says it. And so sometimes it's not what you say. Sometimes it's how you say it. But sometimes it's the look on your face when you say it. Because sometimes I'll say, well, I wasn't being any kind of way. And he was like, you rolled your eyes. And I'm like, I didn't even know I rolled my eyes. So we unintentionally do things, sometimes communicating with the other person non-verbally, and we didn't even mean to.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be aware of our facial expressions too. And that's a hard one for me. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, I can tell what she meant by just the way she's holding her mouth when she speaks to me. So
Terrible.
Like, just because you say one thing and you're, like she said, rolling your eyes at me as you agree with me, or holding your mouth like you really want to say something else. Like, I know what you meant. Like,
Yeah.
when you've been with someone long enough, I've been with her longer in my life now than I was without her.
Yes.
Is that a true statement?
That is a true statement.
That is a true statement. I've been with her longer than I was without her. So, yeah, I know her pretty well. I know what she's thinking. I know what she's going to get mad about. And I know what she means when she says something just because. I
Yes.
just do.
We have lived together longer than we lived with our parents at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've lived in the same house together 19 years.
19 short, long years.
And we moved out. Well, he moved out of his parents' house right after he turned 19. And I moved out of my parents' house at 18. So, yeah, we've lived in the same house together longer than we lived with our parents. And our whole adult life, we've lived together.
And with that time, like she said earlier, we spent 10 years of our marriage just digging a hole.
Yeah.
I mean, digging a hole that only God brought us out of. It wasn't my great ability as an orator or communicator that brought us out of a hole. It wasn't hers because we both pushed us. We both had a shovel and we were both digging.
Yes.
And you know, you may be in that place now that you're just like, I don't know what's going on right now. Well, put the shovel down. Stop digging. Figure out what's going on. Address the situation. Address yourself. Men, look at me. Figure it out. Figure it out. Which one of those four communicators are you? Are you a dominator? Are you an accommodator? Are you a, what's the other two? Avoider? Or are you a collaborator? Because if you're not a collaborator, that's probably your issue. We think that we know best. We think that we can say no wrong. Right? I've said it many times. I've never had a bad idea until it's put into practice. Listen to what your wife is telling you. And if you disagree, then you find a way to tell her you disagree without being dominating or without being aggressive, as the other four types of communication were. Don't be passive aggressive. Don't be aggressive. Address her the way that you would like to be addressed.
Yeah, and I wrote down the definition of assertiveness. It has to do with concern with self, good at taking care of his needs, or standing up for themselves or their point of view. That is the definition in this sense of what we're talking about. That would be assertiveness. You're standing up for you. Empathy, concern for others, sensitive to the needs, opinions, feelings, or perspectives of your spouse. You want to hear your spouse's opinion. You want to support them. That's whatever's important to them. You want to support that. You take their opinions into account when making decisions. And I think it's fair to say that empathy comes easy for me. I'm an empathetic human. I can truly put myself in someone else's shoes and feel what they're feeling. And then Slade.
I'm more sympathetic than empathetic.
And I'm not very sympathetic.
No, she is not. Producer Bailey, is she sympathetic?
She's got the big eyes.
No, she's not. She's not very sympathetic at all. Like, yeah, you just better don't. If I told somebody the other day, they were like, man, you know, I told them about, oh man, I'm finna throw Gavin under the bus tonight. But Gavin was outside in his elf onesie taking out the dogs. And he was like, these kids rode by and laughed at me. I said, yeah, I would have laughed at you too. Look at yourself. You're wearing an elf onesie and it's 80 degrees outside.
Yes.
And you're, besides this, at this time, he was probably 14 or 15 years old. What are you doing right now? And the guy was like, you said that to your son? Yeah, 100% said that
Absolutely.
to my son. He was like, oh man, that's not like most parents or whatever. And then he said, that's not like most dads. And I said, well, you don't want to meet my wife then, because she's way worse on them than I am as far as sympathy. I said, if they're looking for sympathy, they're going to come to me. They're not going to go to their mom, because
I have low tolerance.
when God was handing out sympathy, he skipped right over her.
I just feel like people get themselves in bad situations, and it's hard sometimes for me to be sympathetic with that. Because, I mean, I haven't been dealt the greatest hand sometimes, but you know what? I had to pray about it, and I had to, lack of better terms, pull up my bootstraps and get over myself and move on.
Yeah, and
And
where she says, people get themselves in bad situations. I put myself in a lot of bad situations, and I think that's why, I guess you could call it, it's a form of empathy, but it's
I
really
agree.
it's sympathy, because I look at their situation and I think, man, I've been there. I put myself in that situation, so I know where they're at right now. So that's empathy, but I think it's more sympathy.
Yeah, because I empathize with people. Like if I see someone that's hurting, or maybe they're, struggling or whatever, like that breaks my heart. And I can go to them and be like, I will help anyone. And that's just who I am. But I think it's hard for me, like when someone's like, my boyfriend broke up with me, and the boyfriend was some not great guy. It's hard for me to be like, I am so sorry that happened to you. Well, I'm probably not that sorry, because, well, if you weren't dating this garbage of a human, maybe this wouldn't have happened. So yeah, I've put myself in bad situations, but I didn't go to someone looking, and that's looking for sympathy. And that's probably because that's how I was raised.
Mm-hmm.
Like, my parents were like, well, you got yourself here, so you better figure it out. And they didn't have sympathy for stupidity. That's what they used to tell us. So
yeah.
that's probably where that comes from. But now I can sympathize with him or my kids before I can sympathize with, or my friends, people close to me, but more empathetic than sympathetic for sure.
Yeah.
I don't have much sympathy, and I think that, so empathy came easy for me, but what I was saying is I think it didn't come as easy for you.
Mm-mm.
Especially if he thinks he's right.
I'm more empathetic to complete strangers. I'm empathetic to things on TV. I'm empathetic to things outside of my circle, way more than I am to people around me.
Yeah, and as I just said, if you think you're right about something, and
it's over.
I think you're better, like now, obviously. But used to, if he was right about it, there was no empathy coming from him. If I was hurting over whatever, it didn't matter.
Yeah, no. If she was hurting over whatever it was, and I thought I was right, then she was just gonna have to get over it, because I wasn't apologizing for being correct.
Although sometimes he wasn't correct.
Right. Yeah. Well, in my eyes,
right,
I was correct.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. And sometimes though people will take your assertiveness. What?
I was saying I got all that right here, so you don't have to hit all.
Oh, well, apparently.
He
and I didn't go over each other's notes.
I was reading her notes, and I told her, just don't say all that, because then you're going to take everything I got to say.
Well, least we know the Holy Spirit works with us together.
Communication.
um, Sometimes people will take assertiveness as aggression, though. They will think you're being aggressive because you're telling them what you need. That's not aggression. And some people, like myself, when I'm being assertive and it's something that I feel strongly about, I'm probably loud. I'm a loud human in that sense. I'm not yelling at you. First of all, I'm not a yeller. If I ever start yelling, you have pushed me past the point of bringing me back to reality for a moment because I'm angry. I'm not a yeller. How many times have I ever yelled at you? I can't think of any time I've ever just yelled at you, just screamed at you.
I can't think of an occasion.
I'm not a yeller. I'm really not. Never have been. I just don't like it. I think that yelling at someone makes them feel small, and I just don't like doing it. Now, I'm not going to sit here and tell you I've never yelled at my children, because I have. And no excuse for it. Usually, I've already said the same thing about 150 times by the time I'm yelling. And I tell them I have to act like a crazy person for you to hear me.
And then I would come home at the end of the day and she'd be yelling at them. And I'd be like, hey, you need to take it down a notch. My gosh, why are you yelling at them? She was like, you weren't here the first 77 times that I yelled at, or that I told them nicely, politely, kindly, you weren't here. You come home and it's been all day I've been telling them, and then I yell at them, and then here I am coming to their defense like, hey,
no, you don't have to yell
you
at
ain't gotta
them.
yell at them, calm down. Or take her to the bedroom and be like, hey, what's going on?
He would never do that in front of them.
What are you doing right? Yeah, like, what are you, chill out. Chill out. Chill out. Yeah.
And then we would have to discuss. But
so now I just let it go.
I'll tell you, but now I learned to keep that from happening. Now, if something happens with one of the kids, I immediately tell him. I call him at work. I don't care. Used to, I would just handle it on my own. And then he came home and he had no idea why I was so angry with them. Well, I homeschooled both of these children. I was with them 24/7. I'm still basically with them 24/7. So he had no idea what I had dealt with all day. So now I just let him know. Every time we have a hiccup, he knows about it, because I don't want him to think, well, she yelled at them and she had no reason to. Oh no, now he knows if I yelled at them, it was definitely warranted. But I don't like that. I don't like yelling. So I really try not to. Just because, as I tell the kids, when I yell at them, now I feel bad for yelling at them. And I should have just held my temper and handled it differently. So that's something that I've worked on, I would say, the past year. I've really worked on not being a yeller at all. Like, I'm not a yeller, but when I would get mad, I would yell. And so I've worked on not doing that. And I think it's been much better. But I was saying, people will take your assertiveness as aggressiveness, and I got off on a tangent. But I was saying I get loud if I'm passionate about something. And it's not that I'm yelling. Like, I'll be like, anything that I get, if I'm passionate about it, I'm louder. It's just the way it is. And it can be something so small, but it's because I feel like, well, they really need to hear me because this is so important to me. And so sometimes people take that and they think that I'm being aggressive or mean, and I'm not. I'm just telling them the way I feel about it. And that's just being assertive. That's not me being mean or aggressive at all. Um, if I was being aggressive, they would 100% know
Yeah, true.
it. 100%. And I have to skip my next section because it's what he was going to talk about. So, Slade and I did something the other day, and I encourage you guys to do this. It was a gratitude exercise. And I'm going to let him tell the things that he said about me, and I'm going to tell you guys the things I said about him. So it was 3 things you appreciate about your partner or relationship. And I had my 3 for him were his relationship with Christ, the fact that he's a hard worker and a provider, and he's a good dad and husband. He's always thinking of me and the kids. And then his 3 for me were
The first one was that she supports me 100%. Always, always, always has my back. She always supports me. She's always with me. She's always encouraging me. So she always supports me 100%. Number 2, she's the best mom in the world. Obviously, she said she's with these kids 24/7. I could not do that if I were put in that situation. They would be a lot worse than yelled at, probably. 24/7. That's a lot. Like, and you think about it. Is there anyone you want to spend 24 hours a day, 7 days a week with? I don't want to be around me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Yeah, and let me chime in on that. So, I'll tell you something that drives me nuts is when some parents will say, "I'm with my kids 24/7." But their kids go to school for 8 hours a day. And so me being a homeschool mom, I'm like, "Are you? Are you with your kids 24/7? Please tell me all about that." I'm literally with them 24/7. If they when they were little, if they got a bath, I'm the one that gave it to them. If they ate lunch, I'm the one that fed them. They ate breakfast, it was me. Every snack they ate, it was me. Every extracurricular they did, that was me too. Their schooling all day long, that was me. He didn't go sit at the dance studio for 20 hours a week. You heard that correctly. Between 15 and 20 hours a week, depending on if she was in a production or Gavin was in a production, I sat at a dance studio. I schooled them. I did all of the things. So me being that parent, and now if I'm not at home with Gavin, I'm at work with Bailey. So I literally am with one of them 24/7. So sometimes when I hear people say, "Oh, these kids, I'm with them all the time." And then they send their kids to school or whatever. No hate for people that send their kids to school. That is A-okay. Send your kids to school. Some people are not cut out to homeschool their children, and that is okay. But don't walk around saying that you're with those kids all the time if you are not with them all the time. Not around a mom who's actually with them 24/7. All the time. Literally all the time.
You got that out of your system?
Yeah, I got that out of my system. That is like that. I think for like a homeschool mom, that's almost like spitting on them. Like, "Oh, are you? Please tell me all about it." Anyway, third one.
Before I was so rudely interrupted.
I'm so sorry.
Number 2, she's the best mom in the world. Number 3, her self-awareness, and she is always trying to improve herself. She says sometimes, I've been working on this with myself. And I'll be like, what are you talking about? And she says that, she noticed something about herself. Thank you, Jonathan. She noticed something about herself, and she's been praying about it, and she's been trying to change it. The amount of self-awareness it takes to notice something about yourself that I've never said. I don't know that her kids have ever said anything to her about it, but it's always something. And to notice that, to look inwardly enough to see your flaws and see your own faults and then actively try and fix them, it's inspiring because I promise I'm not looking at myself in the mirror saying, you need to fix this, 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 and this. I'm looking at myself in the mirror saying, you got this, 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 and this going for you. Let's see if we can improve those things. Because, and then it takes someone looking at me and saying, you need to fix this. And for me to be like, oh, do I? But she just figures that out on her own. It's wild. So
Yeah. It's
I
and
appreciate that about her.
and he says, it's wild. She figures it out on her own, but really it's really praying. It's my relationship with Christ. Because so I pray a prayer regularly, and my prayer is anything that's not like you, fix it. Well, if you want to pray that, that's good. But be ready, because he's going to show you every single thing that maybe isn't like him, and you're going to walk through it and fix it.
Yeah.
I've been on I really hate the term like self-care journey, just because I think it sounds so stupid. Um, but really, I mean, I really have, especially the past couple years, but the past 6 months, it's been significant. And I started going to counseling and all of this. And I explained it to him the other day. I said, it's like I've taken so I didn't like dealing with things, whether it be something happened in my childhood or something that happened while I was an adult or whatever. I didn't like dealing with it because I'm not a very emotional human. So I didn't like having to go through the emotions. And so I explained it to him the other day. I said, it's like I've taken all the boxes off the shelf where I had packed everything up and put it up and away so I didn't have to deal with it. I've taken them all off and I've dumped them in the middle of the floor, and they can't go back up. No box can go back on the shelf. And so now I have to pick through that pile of junk in the floor, and I have to go through it all. I have to heal from it all, and I have to move forward. And so in that, every ugly thing about me, I've been having to deal with. And, some people say things like, well, it's your past, you just move on, whatever. But you don't move on. You don't move on until you deal with it.
Yeah, you just carry it around with you.
Yeah.
Like baggage.
And then there'll be things that happen and it triggers something inside of you. But that, when you feel triggered, is when you have to go, whoa, why did that happen? Why was I triggered by that? Why did I let that comment or thing affect me? And so then what I do, usually, I have notes in my phone. I'll type it in there and I'll pray about it. And I pray about it until I feel God move on that particular subject. But don't pray for something you aren't ready for. Because when you start praying, God, show me every ugly thing inside of me that isn't like you. He's going to show you, and it's going to hurt. But it will be freeing in the end. I told him the other day, I've never felt more free in my life. And that's true. There are things that would really just make me angry, just get me just wound up. And I would say the past few months, I'm not nearly as wound up as I was. And it is what it is, kind of like.
Yeah.
And really, that was communicating with Christ and myself. Instead of just avoiding the issues, I decided to face it head on. Mm-hmm. And so that's where we are. Well, now I'm going to let him talk, and I might insert what I have here too, because apparently he says that we have the same notes.
No,
We'll see.
you're done. It's my turn. So, um, so communication is really the foundation of a strong marriage, and a lot of men would not agree with that, but the fact is that it is. It 100% is. More marriages suffer not because they lack love, right? But because they lack communication. Marriages don't fall apart because people don't love each other anymore. Marriages fall apart because there is no communication between the spouses. Communication has broke down, but God wants our words to bring life and to bring healing and to bring unity into our relationships. So I just got 3 points, like any good preacher would. Number 1, speak to each other with love and kindness. I say this all. I didn't have this in my notes, right? But before you say anything, you need to let it pass through 3 gates. Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? If it's not true, keep your mouth shut. Is it necessary? If it's not necessary, keep your mouth shut. If it's not kind, keep your mouth shut, because nothing good is going to come out of that conversation if it doesn't pass all 3 of those tests. Is it true? Is it necessary? And is it kind? All right, so Proverbs 15:1 says, "A gentle answer turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger." You want to know how to make your wife mad at you? Be harsh.
Yes,
But
I agree.
if you're being harsh, if you're responding to her with a harsh tone or harsh words, you're not going to get gentleness in return. But if you approach a situation with gentle words, then a gentle response is more than likely what you're going to get. Proverbs 18:21. There's power. The power of life and death is in the tongue, right? We've all heard that. Words have the power to heal, and they have the power to hurt. What are you using your words for? Are you using them to build each other up, or are you using them to tear each other down? Harsh words create division, while kind words foster intimacy. Speak to your spouse the way you would want to be spoken to. Even if you are in a disagreement, you speak to her the way that you want to be spoken to, and replace criticism with encouragement. So every time you feel like criticizing your spouse about something, why don't you in turn encourage them about something? I One of the things that it just came to me, so pardon me, but I felt like early on in our marriage, not now, but early on in our marriage, I felt like all I ever got was criticism. I didn't get any encouraging words. I got criticism. You don't do this. You didn't do that. You never do this. You always do that. And that was, and my response to that would be harsh. Like it would come back to her harshly. And in her saying those critical words at that time, then I would respond with, well, you always have something negative to say about me, or you never have anything good to say about me. I've done this, 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 and this, but this is all you want to talk about. But now it's not like that anymore. But just every time you want to criticize something about your spouse, instead find something to say that is encouraging about them, because words build up and they tear down, they heal and they hurt, they bring life and they bring death.
And I will say this, him saying that, he's not wrong. I was very critical. And if I'm being honest, some of that came from, if I'm just being 100% honest with you guys, and that's just who I am, it came from a place of I compared him to me. And I was looking at all of the things I was doing by myself in the house, including raising 2 kids. And he smoked weed when he got home, and he was useless. after he smoked pot. And so at that point, every thought I had, like I could see the good things he was doing, but the negative in that moment was outweighing the positive. And so, and he's never heard me say that. So y'all are getting to just hear a little.
You're getting a little counseling session
yeah.
right now.
And so that's why I was so critical, and that doesn't give me a reason to be critical. That's not okay at all, and I shouldn't have been because I very much was. That is why I did it, and that doesn't make it acceptable. That is the way I was thinking, though, not that that was okay to think that way. And so he was getting the critical tongue, unfortunately, from me, and the reason why was because I was looking at him going, yeah, but so I'm going to say this. Y'all have heard me say things Dr. Phil says. The other day I was listening to a podcast with him. I was on the treadmill and he said, so the spouse said, I love him, but I needed more. And Dr. Phil said, anytime you say but, anything that came before the but doesn't matter. And so I try really hard when communicating with him. I don't say that word. Even when I'm communicating with my kids, I try not to say that because that is the truest thing I've ever heard. If you have to say but, whatever you said before the but, they don't care. They're not hearing that. Mm-mm. All they heard was but whatever it might be.
It's good.
They didn't hear anything before the but.
Yeah. So, yeah, speak with kindness and love. And then number 2, listen with understanding. Me and her just talked about this the other day. James 1:19 says, everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. And then verse 20 goes on to say, because human anger is not the righteousness that God desires. And you know who else doesn't desire it? Your spouse. Your spouse doesn't care to see your anger. And they want you to listen to them more than you are talking. Just shut your mouth. Shut your mouth.
Yeah.
I say this. God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth so you can listen twice as much as you talk.
That's good, Terry.
Shut your mouth and listen to what they are saying to you. Listen to what they want you to hear. Don't listen. This is what me and her were talking about. We listen to respond instead of listening to understand. So if I'm listening to respond, then all I'm doing is using my 2 ears so that I can now use my mouth and defend myself and come back at her. And while she's talking, all I'm doing in my mind is trying to figure out, how am I going to defend myself? How am I going to come back at this? How am I going to put down what she's saying? And when we are listening that way, it is not going to end well. When we listen to respond, that is a sure sign of an argument that is about to start, because maybe she doesn't need a response. Maybe she just needs you to say, I hear you.
Yes.
I hear you. I hear what you're saying.
Do you have a Bible verse for that? Because I do, if you do not.
I do not.
Okay, then I'm going to share mine.
This is my time.
Well, it's too bad for you. Proverbs 18:13 says, to answer before listening, that is folly and shame.
Folly.
That's what I meant. Folly. I was looking down here at foolishness too. So synonyms for folly are foolish, craziness, and absurdity. So to answer before listening, that is absurdity and shame.
Yeah.
That's Proverbs 18:13.
Shut your mouth.
Yeah.
Shut your mouth, open your ears. Communication is not about just speaking, but it is also about listening. Conflicts arise because we listen to respond rather than to understand. And so show active listening by, I ought to just let her say this, put down your phone. Don't be looking at your phone while she's talking to you, because I happen to know this from experience, that if you're on your phone while she's talking to you, not only is she getting mad, you don't know what she's saying. And
Is that right?
3 days later, can I get an amen? Anybody in the chat, amen that. Do not make me sit here and feel alone in this. Men, women, any of you. If I'm the only one that does this, there's some liars in the chat box. But if you're looking at your phone, if I'm reading something on my phone while she is talking to me, only one of those two things is going to register. And
April said amen.
3 days later, when she says, I told you that. And I'm like, you never told me that. Yeah, I did. I told you that. Nope, you never told me that. Well, more than likely she did tell me that. I was just on my phone and didn't even register what she was telling me. I might have responded to her while she was talking to me. It happens all the time with her and the kids. It's ridiculous.
It's sad.
It's sad. It really is. But I can be having a conversation with them and have no idea what we're talking about. So I'm glad to see I'm not the only one. Kristen gave us the triple amen. So, yeah. And so at that point, once we speak kindly and we listen to understand, conflicts are still going to arise, and we have to handle those conflicts, and we should handle those conflicts with grace. Ephesians 4:26 says, do not let the sun go down while you are still angry. So every marriage is going to have conflict, and you're going to have times that you're going to be fussing, or maybe not even fussing, but there's a tension there that needs to be dealt with. And how we handle that tension and how we handle those conflicts is going to be a determining factor in the strength of our marriage.
Yes. And I'll say, if you're sitting there thinking, well, me and my spouse, we just don't have issues, we just don't argue, it's probably because one of you is very passive. And so you allow the other one to just make all of the rules. That's how I was the first solid 5 years of our marriage. And that's probably hard for you guys to believe because I'm not that person now. But the first 5 years, I just let him make all the decisions. And I just went with it. And then what happened was it caused resentment. Yeah, I thought that we were doing great because we weren't arguing or anything like that. Well, let me tell you what happened. Year 5 through 9.5 got wild because I was like, well, I'm not doing this. This is crazy. And so then I started saying stuff back passive aggressively or however I wanted to say it. And that's when the issue arose. So if you're sitting there going, well, me and myself don't have any issues, that's great. But sometimes you might need to go, or is one of us being so passive that we're allowing the other one to just make all of the decisions and dominate me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. So you got to resolve that conflict, because if you don't resolve the conflict, like she said, and one person is calling all the shots and the other person is suppressing everything, well, when that person finally starts speaking up and speaking out, the one that was calling all the shots is going to say, well, where'd all this come from? I thought everything was fine. What's going on right now? they're going to be so lost and so confused, and they're not even going. But the thing is, you're doing that person a disservice by
Yes.
allowing them to dominate everything and call all the shots, because they're not even going to know they had a problem.
Yes.
They're not even going to know they had an issue. And then when you bring it all out and say, well, you've been dealing with this for 7 years, you're like, well, you never said anything to me about it.
Yes.
You never voiced that concern. Um, how can I fix something that I don't know is broken? How can I fix something if I don't know anything is wrong? So, yeah, address it, address the issue, confront the issue,
But do it
and
in love.
do it in love. Speak softly, kindly, gently. Um, like I said it a while ago, speak to your spouse the way you want your spouse to speak to you. Do you want your spouse being snarky and short and rude? No, nobody wants that. Dana said, "Be real." Yeah, be real. Be Tell them how you're feeling, what you're feeling, and then have that issue resolved before you go to bed. Because when you go to bed, you're going to allow yourself to be offended,
Yes.
and then you're going to start that resentment process, and then you're going to have unforgiveness. And she had 7 years, 8 years, 9 years of pent up frustration, offendedness, if that's a word, resentment, and it turned into unforgiveness. And it took a lot. You know, we haven't even mentioned this in this uh, live stream tonight, but that's one of the main reasons she was. We were on divorce's doorstep. How long ago?
Been 9 years
9 years
ago.
ago, 10 years ago. We were on divorce's doorstep because she had so much resentment and hurt directed at me because of my communication skills. And they were lacking. They were severely lacking. So if you're watching this tonight, right now, live, if you're watching this later, if you think you have these perfect communication skills and you think everything's great and wonderful, I'm gonna break your heart and tell you that you're wrong, and that you always can be working on it. You can always be improving. Ask your spouse, what can I do better? How can I communicate better? And then listen for their response, and then put it into action. Figure it out. Talk it out. And yeah, it'll be a lot better.
Yeah, I have on here, words can build up or tear down a relationship. What are yours do? That's an easy question to ask yourself. Like, are my words building them up or are they tearing them down? And if they're tearing them down, then they shouldn't be spoken. You just shouldn't say those words.
Yeah, some people I know for a fact say things intentionally to hurt their spouse. So
That's
we
wild.
we've never been um, we've never been those people,
No.
but I know it happens. And if you say things, if you take a dig or a jab at your spouse just because you know it's going to set them off, then you need to look in the mirror. You need to look in the mirror and do some serious self-reflecting, because I would never want her to feel bad. I would never intentionally say anything to her to hurt her feelings, or take her back to a place in her life that she's tried to forget. So if you're one of those people, you need to get it together. You need to stop. And you really need to pray about that.
Yeah. And Kyle, I hear you. You're not good with words. So Bailey is right. She's not good with words. And only because she's in here will I say this. I'm going to get the okay first, Bailey. Can I say it? Okay. All right. So she's not good with words. And it's something that I don't want her to take into a marriage because her dad was not good with words for years and years and years. And that was a huge issue. I sorry. Doing. I was
Don't get distracted.
I'm sorry. It was a huge issue for us. That was why our communication was, lacking so bad. And so because he wasn't good with words. And so now I'm constantly on Bailey. I'm like, you have to communicate. You have to talk about it.
Well, literally what she says is use your words.
Yeah. And I've said that since they were little. That was on Sesame Street. They used to say, use your words, use your words. Anyway.
We didn't need a concert.
Well, I'm just saying, that's what he said. And so I've said that to my kids since they were little. Gavin is great at using his words. Sometimes he uses them a little too much. But I would rather them use their words too much than not use them enough.
Mm-hmm.
So the last thing I'm going to leave you guys with is couples should speak words that edify and practice forgiveness while also emphasizing the importance of listening and understanding. So speak words that are edifying to your spouse.
Build them up.
Build them up.
Build them up. Talk them in to the spouse you want them to be.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I always heard it said, spoken this way, speak to the king.
He said he
people.
picks the wrong words.
Yeah, that's going to take some practice. You got to pick and choose those words, Kyle. Speak to the king in people. Don't speak to the negative. Speak to the royalty in her. Speak to the queen in her, not to everything you think is wrong. Because when all you want to talk about is everything you think is wrong, well, that's all you're ever going to see.
Mm-hmm.
That's all they're ever going to live up to. What I think I said this on here a couple weeks ago. Maybe I didn't. Maybe I said this to somebody else. She married 100% potential. I had nothing going for me at all. Nothing. Listen, guys, when I say I had nothing going for me, I had nothing going for me. I was a drug addict. I had a child that wasn't hers biologically.
Well, not originally, though. When I started dating him,
well, now you're
we
getting
were
into
17.
the weeds. Yeah.
And he didn't have a child.
The person you said that you would marry was had if my daughter brought me home, I'd be like, no, ma'am. Not an option. Not an option. I'll break your kneecaps. You won't walk down the aisle. Not an option. But
wow.
Would you let her marry me?
No.
Okay.
No, absolutely not. That's a podcast for a different day.
Yeah. But she didn't point those things out to me. Right? No. She only pointed out the potential in me. I was going to say the great things in me, but there weren't any. The potential in me. And if you really want your spouse to be that person that you know they can be, then that's the person you need to start talking to.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and you did have good things. I mean, I would have to think what
she would have to think about it for a little while, but yeah.
Thank you, Dana.
Thank you, Miss Dana.
And Kristen said, "It's okay, baby. I know what you mean." So, Kyle, it might not always be bad words. It might just be you've got to work on your communication skills.
It takes practice.
Absolutely,
It takes practice. I can't tell you how many times that she would say, "Okay, you're shutting down on me right now.
Mm-hmm.
You're shutting down on me." And then I would just force myself, even if it's words that what was the terminology he used? Even if it is the wrong words, man, just say something. Just say something. Just let her know that you're putting in an effort to speak and to communicate, and you will get better. I'm not great at it now by any stretch of the imagination, but I do try. I do put forth an effort, and a lot of times that's all they're looking for is to know that you care and that you hear them.
And if you have a spouse that's a better communicator than you,
Terry, we need to be pulled, not pushed.
Yeah. Kyle said I'm blunt and have a hard time overcoming that. I am too. So as long as your bluntness isn't hateful, you're just being assertive. And as long as you're not yelling at them, if you're just saying, look, and I say this all the time, there is a way to say things to get your point across, still be direct, but sometimes be nicer. But you have to learn those. Like, it does not happen overnight. It takes time and practice. It really does. But if you have a spouse that's willing to help you, that's what he had to help me with, was how direct I was. He had to teach me that it could be said differently. And then I had to help him learn to speak, period. Because he would just sit there and look at me. And so I learned I would ask questions. And I would say, okay, I need an answer. You're going to answer me. We'll sit here all night. Eventually, they get real tired of sitting there all night with you asking them the same questions, it seems like, over and over again. And they'll just learn, okay, I just got to tell them, because they're not going to let this go. Mm-hmm. And that's what I did with him. And still, until this day, I have to ask questions sometimes. Like, if I feel like he's shutting down, I'll say, okay, so why are you feeling this way? Why are you shutting down on me? You know, what is wrong with you, or whatever. I struggle to find the right words. It isn't meant to be ugly. It's just blunt. It's struggle to find softer words, but it's something I'm working on. And that's all you can do.
That's all you can do.
Once you realize that it's something you have to work on, that's all you can do. Work on it. I mean, it's taken us years to get here. I mean, we'll be married 18 years in May, and we've been together 21 years. We took a brief moment there, and we split up. No, he did not.
Split up?
21 years?
Oh, you talking about when we was kids? I thought you were talking about when we was married. I'm like, oh, we're split up.
Dude, we've been together since we were 17. That would be 21 years.
Yeah, I understand that, but you said split up, and I was thinking I had marriage on my mind.
No, I was not wanting them to think that you cheated on me to get a kid.
Yeah, I wasn't thinking high school.
So, anyways,
that don't even count. Split up.
We were split up.
Well, we were.
Yeah, we were. Anyways,
but were we ever really like together?
Well, yeah.
Okay.
Okay. So, okay, fine. We'll go with we've been together.
Well, you can go. We've been together
years.
for 21 years.
No, we've been together 19 years.
Okay.
We've been living together 19 years. Let's say that. And I don't even know where I was going with this because you cut me off.
We split up.
Huh?
We split up.
Well, I don't know. It's fine.
Oh my goodness.
It's fine.
Here we go.
Bailey said,
We're go-
awkward.
We're gonna have to communicate about this.
No, we don't have to communicate about it. It's fine. I mean, we were together 21 years. We split up for a little while. You got someone pregnant.
That
I mean, you want
happened.
to tell how this happened?
I mean, that's what happened.
That's what
That
happened.
is what happened. Yeah,
That is what happened.
100%.
And then Bailey wasn't even born yet. We started talking about getting back together. She was 2 weeks old. We got back together, and you literally moved in with me a month and a half later.
Yeah,
That's what happened.
that's how.
Pick the right word, Slade. Kyle said.
That's why I stopped talking. See, she could take that as me shutting down, but right now I'm like, I just can't say anything right now because it's gonna be not good. So,
Really, I think it would have been fine.
you think so?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could have worked through it.
We would have been fine. Yeah. Anyway, it was great. I hope you guys learned something tonight.
Yeah, you learned that we've been together for 21 years and split up.
This guy.
So.
Yeah. But, I know what I was saying. I was saying communication. I was saying it took us a long time.
Yeah.
Like, we'll be married 18 years in May, and I would say it took us a solid 15 years to feel like we actually had this pretty good. I said to someone one day, I don't take marriage advice from anyone that's been married less than 15 years because I think after 15 years, you really know that person.
Mm.
The first 15 years is a trial and error.
Yeah. And you got to figure it out.
Yeah.
You really have to figure it out. Like, oh, it's tough. It's tough. 10
Yeah.
years is tough. 15 years is tough. And we're on the downhill slide now.
Yeah.
Like,
I agree. It's been the easiest time in our marriage, I would say, the past 3 years, probably.
yeah. Like, you know, when I said, one of us said, don't get offended. Like, you just let stuff roll off your back. Like,
Yes.
she loves me. I know she loves me. She knows I love her. She would not intentionally do anything to hurt me.
No.
I wouldn't do anything to hurt her.
No.
So why am I getting offended? Why am I getting my feelings hurt? And then carrying it around. Like, man, get over it. Your wife loves you. Your husband loves you. Know that they love you. And do not carry around an offense, not only with your spouse, but with anybody. Don't get offended by what anybody says to you because you're just giving them power over you. You're giving them control into your life, and you don't want anybody outside of, the Lord to have any control over your life.
Yes. And the reason why I say 15 years as well is because I think that you learn a lot about someone the first 10 years. Like, I feel like in the first 10 years, I pretty much learned basically all I needed to know. Like, as far as, like, things that set you off, things that you liked.
How about this? First 10 years, you learn what not to do.
Yeah. And then for 5 years from that point, you're working on those that you're literally trying not to do those things. And you're learning to talk it through more than you did the first 10 years. The first 10 years you argued about it more. Then you're year 10 to 15 and you're like, okay, you're regressing in this area. I need you to do this or whatever. And so it starts getting easier. And I think by year 16, it's almost like, I'm not going to say you have it totally figured out, but you have it much more figured out.
Yeah. You got it whipped.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Now it's like, this guy. Like, he might irritate me sometimes, and I know I irritate him. Boy, I could irritate anybody. But you can agree with that.
No, I'm choosing I'm picking the right words, as Kyle
Yeah,
said.
well, the right words right then would have been like, yeah, you're right. Because I'm absolutely correct. But yeah, like, you know, I know I get on his nerves and he knows he gets on mine, and that's okay. We're humans and that's the way it's going to be. So anyway, that's all I got.
I just showed her on my phone that I have to pee really, really, really bad. So we're about to shut this thing down. Love y'all.
Love y'all. Bye.
See you next week.